I'm Mike Uyak. I love to try new things, and I've had culinary adventures all around the world, as well as right at home. I've had really wonderful food, as well as some really horrible food. I'd like to share some of my adventures with you, and we'll see if I have what it takes to fix whatever goes wrong. This is Recipe Redemption. Greetings and salutations, Redeemers, and welcome to today's edition of Recipe Redemption. Today, we're going to be trying this little treat. A little miniature Stargazy Pie. Now, there's a story that goes behind Stargazy Pie. It starts off way back in the mists of time. No one knows really 100% when this dish actually became a thing, or was invented. But sometime way back when, the Cornish coast was ravaged by a whole series of storms. And as happened at that period of time, when you had that kind of weather, that area of the coast got cut off from pretty much everybody, from the rest of England. So they weren't getting any supplies by land because the weather was just the roads were just too bad. And no one was going to sea to fish because the storms were too heavy. They were going to lose fishing vessels. But the people were starving. So enter our hero, Tom Bowcock, who sets out in his fishing boat, hell or high water, so to speak, in order to get some fish and feed the people. And sure enough, as dawn broke over the coastline, there is Tom Bowcock's boat coming in with an entire hold full of fish. They set to work, and his catch went directly into a pie. And every Tom Bowcock's Eve, which is December 23rd, the people of Mousehole, Cornwall, England, make this. Well, larger versions of this with different fish. Stargazy Pie. The sort of identifying feature of which is that the head and tail of the fish is actually poking out of the top of the pie. Now, the challenging thing about this is that the fish, the head and tail, the easiest way to do this is for the fish to go in whole. So you have a fish pie, which is not unusual, particularly in England. We don't have it so much here in the U.S., and it's kind of a shame because a well-made fish pie is actually a wonderful thing. But this goes in with the bones intact. You gut them, you scale them, but you leave the bones in so that you have this whole fish. That is the feature of the pie. So here's how it's made.
As always, I'm just going to try and make one serving of this rather than a whole pie, so I'm using a little tart pan. But the recipe for the Stargazy Pie is actually quite simple. Just lay the fish, whole fish, has been gutted and scaled, into the pie. This was labeled as smoked hake, but I always thought hake was a larger fish. These look an awful lot like the herring that's supposed to be in this pie. Some chopped onion and some chopped hard-boiled egg, or not quite hard-boiled egg. I guess it's been a while since I've boiled an egg. And a little bit of ham. It's going to add a little bit more sort of meatiness to this. And other than a grind of black pepper and a sprinkle of salt, that's pretty much it. Just top with the upper crust of the pie and sort of seal around the fish as best you can. Because it's not a very juicy pie, there's not a whole lot of liquids, you don't have to worry about anything bubbling over. And then just stick this into the oven for about a half an hour at 350 until golden brown delicious.
Okay, so nothing to it but to try it now. I'm actually gonna dig away a bit of the crust because, well, I use store-bought crust, so we know it's going to be Not great, but we know it's going to be fine. What I really want to get into is the center. Oops, as I dump some of it onto the table. And I really want to get to some of this fish. Now, this is not the herring that is traditional, because as I said, for whatever reason right now, herring is hard to get a hold of. And I'm having a hard time actually getting any of this on my fork. So there's a little egg, there's a little ham, and there's a little bit of the flaked fish. I'm still getting kind of the bones. It's tasty enough. The bones are a little distracting. It's actually a fairly decent fish pie. Now, when you get a regular fish pie, well, first of all, there aren't heads and tails sticking out of it. It is generally deboned. Well, it's always deboned. And usually cut into chunks or flaked. I would be interested if I ever found myself in the area around Mousehole in England around Christmas time. I would be interested in actually traveling there and trying the real thing by someone who had, people who have been making this dish for generations. Just to try it out, see if the hype is really worth it. But this is Recipe Redemption. And far be it for me to say that I can improve upon a sort of local favorite dish, much beloved with who knows how many hundreds of years of tradition behind it. However, I and a lot of people do find the fish head sticking out of the pie to be a little off-putting. So I think I'm going to set out to make this a little bit more presentable if I can. What I think I'm going to do is instead of, a sort of, a pie, I'm going to try and make something that's more like a Cornish pasty with basically the same ingredients, but something a little more presentable. Let's see what I can do.
So I want to start this off by sauteing some onion in a couple tablespoons of butter, just until it starts to sort of caramelize a little bit, get a little color, and then add a couple tablespoons of flour. And I'm going to stir that around until the flour is fully incorporated, and cook it for a couple more minutes just to kind of cook out that raw flour flavor. And then add some fish stock. You may have guessed I'm making a velouté with onion in it. Yeah, there it is. There's some cream. I'm making a velouté, and I want this to be fairly thick. I want it to kind of hold together so that eventually I have a thick fish stew with the addition of some mixed vegetables here. I've cheated a little bit and just got some frozen peas and carrots. That's fine. And then I flaked up the hake, and I had some smoked mackerel from my previous video. And you may notice I'm picking out spinal stuff here. I did the best I could picking out the bones, but it wasn't perfect, which is why it's actually better to use canned fish for something like this. Just you manage to actually get all the bones out. But anyway, once that's all cooked up nice and thick and then cooled, so it thickens even more, I put it right down the center of a prepared pie dough. And yes, once again, I'm using store-bought pie dough because, yeah. Once I got a fairly decent sized little log of fish stew in the middle, I'm just going to fold this over, seal it the best I can, flip it over onto my little baking sheet there, and bake at 350 for about 30 minutes. An egg wash wouldn't hurt, but I didn't think to do it. Next time, I suppose.
So, a little bit of a fail in terms of making the Cornish fish pie slash pasty more presentable. My pie crust was a little too dry, and so it kept cracking every time I even breathed on it, let alone handled it. So this is what I ended up with. It's a little crackly. It's actually split open in a few places. Fortunately, I did make the filling very thick, so it didn't run out everywhere. I'm going to break off this bit because that's mostly crust, the side too, since it's falling off. But in any case, I want to try this and just see, if a fish pasty slash Uber Hot Pocket is any good. Very fishy, because I used both the smoked hake and the mackerel, which is very fishy, very oily fish. That flavor comes through pretty strongly. That fish oil flavor kind of lends a certain bitterness to this, which isn't necessarily bad, but it can be a little overpowering. This is very fishy, but the sort of seafood velouté that I used as the sort of binding sauce, and the vegetables do temper that quite a bit. This requires a bit of tinkering. I did not get this perfectly right. And because all of my fish, including the smoked stuff, still had the bones in it, I was not able to eliminate 100% of those little tiny bones. Some of them did get past me and into the filling. So I think if I was actually able to find canned mackerel or any other fish that you might want to throw into this fish pasty, they're processed well enough that they actually do remove all the little bones. Makes for a much more pleasant eating experience. But on the whole, not bad. Again, not saying anything about this being an improvement over the Stargazy Pie. Not saying the Stargazy Pie requires redemption, because it's a cultural icon. It is sort of a novelty at this point, but it is a traditional food. So I'm certainly not going to badmouth something that has, hundreds of years of tradition behind it. even if it is a little scary looking. But I think that the fish pasty, if you are kind of put off by the fish head sticking out of your pie, I think it's a suitable substitute with a bit of refinement. So what do you think? Would you try the Stargazy Pie? And if not, would the Cornish fish pasty be an acceptable replacement for it? Let me know in the comments below. And as always, like, subscribe, share with your friends. And please do share any other ideas, including, traditional dishes like this that might be a little bit unusual to the American palate. Please suggest those as well. So until next time, I'm Mike Uyak, and I'd like to thank you for watching Recipe Redemption.